Hi everyone, this video will outline how to make tables according to the 7th edition of APA style. Tables are an essential part of displaying data and information to your readers, so understanding how to make one is important. The video description contains timestamps that will jump you to various parts of the video along with links to other APA style videos, which I encourage you to use. I am demonstrating everything in this video using Microsoft Word on a Windows computer. If you are using a different word processing program or a different version of Word, your table should still look the same, but the buttons you press may differ. In order to get the most use out of this video, I recommend pausing and rewinding as needed. Also, note that I'm using lorem ipsum text or placeholder text for illustrative purposes. Now, before you actually make a table, you should determine whether a table is even necessary. And because every paper and every dataset is different, how you make that decision and what goes into it will always differ. The goal that you should keep in mind, though, is presenting data to your readers clearly and accurately. If a table helps you to accomplish that goal, then it's probably worth including. If not, then it's probably better to present your data a different way. To build on that, you generally want to strike a balance between writing too many test results in the text and having too many tables and figures. At either extreme, it can become confusing for your readers to follow along. Of course, you might have a lot of results to report, especially for large projects, theses, dissertations, etc. In those cases, I suggest grouping your results into subsections using headings. Again, the goal is presenting your results to your readers clearly, so think about the best ways to organize them. Another question to consider is whether you should use a table or a figure to show your results. Again, this will come down to what you think is the best way to present your results to your readers. In general, figures are ideal for highlighting your main findings because they can visually convey what your results were, which if done well will help your readers understand your findings better. Tables, on the other hand, tend to be more useful when you have large amounts of the same type of data to present, or for data that is more supplemental in nature. For example, if you ran a series of t-tests between 5 pairs of variables, rather than writing out the results of each one in the text or creating a figure for each one, it's simpler and more concise to put all the results in a table. As another example, if you have a lot of demographic data on your participants, you can likely sum that up neatly in a table without identifying every characteristic in the text. That said, it ultimately depends on what type of data you have and how much of it you have. Again, you have to make the decision yourself on the best way to present your data to your readers. Alright, so before showing you how to make a table, I want to briefly go through the different parts of a table. First is the table number, written out as table X in bold on its own line. On a separate line below the table is the table title, which is in italics and uses title case, meaning that each important word starts with a capital letter. The ideal table title should clearly describe what is in the table without being overly detailed and lengthy. Next is the table itself, which, depending on how complicated it is, can have a number of elements in it. Commonly, you will see column headings, column spanners, which are headings that describe 2 or more columns, and a stub heading, which defines the leftmost column. Note that headers are written in sentence case, meaning only the first word and proper nouns start with a capital letter. For now, also note that there are no vertical lines. The last element to a table are notes. You do not need to have notes, but oftentimes they are necessary. There are 3 different types of notes: general, specific, and probability, and they should be placed below the table in that order. So a general note will start on its own line below the table, then come any specific notes on a new line, followed by any probability notes on a new line. All notes should be double spaced and left aligned. And if you have more than one note on a line, you can separate them with a period. General notes are used to help explain parts of the table that might not be immediately clear, such as explaining abbreviations, symbols, emphasized cells, etc., or for providing an acknowledgement if the table is taken from another source. General notes start with the word note in italics, followed by a period. Specific notes are used to reference particular cells, rows, or columns, and these are denoted in the table itself with superscript lowercase letters. starting with the letter A. So as you can see here, specific note was used to provide more detail on the participants. And note the space between the superscript letter and the rest of the cell. When writing out specific notes, start them on their own line, rewriting the superscript letter, add a space, then write out the explanation. Probability notes are used to denote statistical significance. Ideally, you would report the exact p-value. However, if you have multiple significant results in a table, it becomes easier to use general cutoffs. For example, a single asterisk usually corresponds to a p-value of less than 0.05. Two asterisks correspond to a p-value of less than 0.01, and three asterisks correspond to a p-value of less than 0.001. One other quick point here, the APA Style Guide notes that if you are trying to show significant differences between means, such as with t-tests and ANOVAs, it's easier to use subscript letters and then include explanatory information in a general note. As you can see in this example, in the first row of data, young adults were significantly different from the other two age groups, so subscript letters A and B were used to show those differences. In the second row, there were no significant differences, so all the subscript letters are the same. In the third row, all age groups were significantly different from each other. So three different subscript letters were used, and the order of the letters matches the numerical order of the data. Having gone through all that, let's make a table. First, we need to write out the table number and title, each of which are on their own line. Again, the table number is in bold, and the table title is written in italics and in title case. Each of these lines should be double-spaced, like the rest of your paper. To make the table itself, go to Insert, and then Table. When you click on that, you have a couple of ways to proceed. For smaller tables, you can just mouse over the number of columns and rows you want and just click on that. Or you could click Insert Table and manually input the number of columns and rows that you want. I'm going to make a 7 by 5 table. Now, depending on your settings, when you insert a table, it might show up a different color with a shaded first row and banded rows. If it does that, the easiest thing to do is to just click anywhere on the table, then under Table Design, click the More button under Table Styles, and select the Table Grid option, which is the first option under Plain Tables. Alternatively, you can also uncheck the boxes under Table Style Options in the top left, then highlight the table and click the arrow under Borders. Then Borders and Shading, then change the color to black. You do not want any cells shaded or in different colors. Now, if you are wondering about eliminating the vertical lines, we'll get to that later. You're welcome to do that at the start, but personally I find it easier to leave them in until the table is formatted exactly how I want it, so I can clearly see where each cell begins and ends. Along those lines, one tip to help make formatting easier is to turn on formatting symbols, which you can do by clicking on the Show Hide button or the paragraph symbol under Home. Don't worry, these do not print out, and you can turn them off at any point. Now I just added some fictional data to the table, so now I need to clean it up and adjust the formatting. When it comes to spacing, you can have either single, 1.5, or double spacing. Again, the goal is clarity of presentation, so pick whatever makes your table easiest for your readers to understand. I'm going to double space mine. But if you notice, that keeps everything up in the top left of each cell, which is kind of ugly because the spacing within each cell is off and doesn't look good. So here's how to avoid that and make your table a little bit more readable. First, make your table single-spaced. Under Layout, with the options called Cell Size, make the row height larger. I'm going to change it to 0.4 inches. You can also play around with the column width here as well. Next, under Alignment, change to Align Center Left from Align Top Left. And you'll see the text is now perfectly centered in the cell. If you try to do this after double spacing the traditional way, it won't work. So now from here, you want all headers and numerical data to be centered in the middle of the cell. So what you can do next is just adjust the headers and data columns to align center and keep the row titles left aligned. Next, let's deal with organization. As you can see, we have data for female students, male students, and the whole class. But those words are currently centered over the means, when they should be centered over both the means and their standard deviations. We can do that by creating a column spanner. Highlight female in the blank cell to its right, and select Merge Cells. Now it's centered over both data columns, which makes it easier for your readers to understand. And if you need to undo that, you could highlight that cell and then select Split Cells and indicate in the pop-up how many columns you want to turn this into, and then it will go back to how it was before. Also, as you see here, there are tools to add new rows and columns. These options are also available by right-clicking in the table itself and going to Insert. Next, let's pretend that we need to make a general note. On the first line under the table, write Note in italics followed by a period and a space. Then write out whatever you need to explain. You also want a small space between the table and the note to keep up the double-spaced appearance. You can do that by simply highlighting the text, clicking on line and paragraph spacing in Home, and then selecting Add Space before paragraph. Now, I'd say we're at a pretty good point to play around with the borders. Personally, I find it easiest to clear all the borders, then add in the ones that I need. So I highlight the whole table, go to Table Design. You could also do this from Home. Go to Borders, and then click on No Border. From there, with the whole table still highlighted, add the top border and bottom border. Finally, add borders as needed within the tables. Typically, you'll want them at the top and bottom of each table, as we just did, below any column spanners, and above any data points. And there you go. Table is done. The last major item to discuss with tables is how to integrate them into your paper. One thing you must do is refer to your tables in the text, meaning you should include them as part of a sentence or as part of a parenthetical. So for example, you might briefly describe your participants and then write something like, for more demographic data, please refer to Table 1. It can be that simple, but you do need to do that for all your tables. Next, you actually need to decide where in the paper to place your table. You have two choices, but if you are doing this for a journal, thesis, assignment, publisher, etc., do whatever they specify. If no preference is specified, ask. The first option is to embed your tables in the main body of your paper near where you refer to them. So as you can see here, this table is integrated into the results section. Note as well that the table comes after a full paragraph. Do not break up paragraphs to place tables. Also note that there is a blank double-spaced line before and after the table. This is to make it clear to your readers where the table begins and ends. The second option is to include them at the end of your paper after the references. With this option, each table will be on its own separate page. I tend to prefer this option because it makes things a little cleaner in my opinion, especially if you are still working on the body of your paper, which could cause the positioning of the table and the text to change, but that's just me. Now, if you have very long tables, they might span multiple pages no matter what you do to make them more concise. In those situations, you want to repeat your headings on the next page to make continuity easier. Also, if you have a very wide table, you could either change the page to landscape, or you could repeat the first column on subsequent lines, similar to repeating the column headings for long tables. Now, in the video description, there is a link to a document that has the example tables I used in this video, along with additional examples. These should give you a sense for how different types of tables look, how to organize data, how to write notes, and so on. So I strongly encourage you to look at it. The data in all these tables are fictional. Their purpose is merely to provide some basic examples of common table types. Because the possibilities are endless, I suggest looking at the APA Style Guide if you have specific questions about making tables for a particular test or set of data. The Style Guide has over 20 examples, so odds are good you'll find an answer in there. In closing, in this video we went through when to use tables, the various elements and properties of tables, how to make tables and format them properly, and where to place them in your paper. I hope you found this video helpful. I used the 7th edition of the Publication Manual of the American Psychological Association from 2020 to make this video. I definitely recommend either buying a copy yourself or encouraging your library to pick up a couple of copies so that you can look at it as needed. There are numerous permutations and special scenarios that I cannot go into in one video, but the publication manual will cover them all with a lot of examples. So if you have a question, you're probably going to find an answer in it. The APA Style blog and Purdue OWL are two great online resources to check out as well, and I'll link to them in the video description. I also have other videos on APA Style, so please check the video description for links to them. Thanks for watching, and good luck writing.